Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Cabali and the Tiki Mug Obsession explores the colorful subculture of tiki enthusiasts who celebrate and collect ceramic drinking vessels known as tiki mugs, as well as the artists who create them. Wonderful film, fun, interesting. We're joined today by the director, Joshua Dragotta, as well as the film's subject, Doug Finical. And to both of you, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you for having us. Great to be here.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this film, and I had so much fun not only learning about tiki, although I had some kind of exposure to it, I didn't realize it. I also had a friend of mine who bought me a shag calendar many years ago. And I was like, what the hell? I kind of lived through this sort of era of the sort of the Jetsons and that kind of cool mid-century culture, which this feels like this is a little bit of that in here as well. And just loved it, freaking loved it. So tell me, Josh, a little bit about how you came to this project. How did you become the director behind Cabali and the Tiki Mug?
Fini and I go back to about 2008. We made a short film together. It was called Save the Tiki, and it was about Fini's quest to move this 20-ton giant tiki moai head from one part of the city to another part of the city. He was managing a bar downtown Tucson, and he wanted to erect this giant tiki head on 4th Avenue, and he's successful in doing so.
It probably sort of should have served as a warning that I had the propensity to get in over my skis pretty early because, and I think that Cabali, the bar and the film was just carrying that out to its logical end and see how much could we possibly take off if we can chew.
He called and said, hey, I got an idea. Okay. I would love to talk to you about it. I had just moved back to Tucson because of COVID and that. So I was living out in LA, but had moved back to Tucson. And so he said, let's sit down. And I said, okay, let's have some coffee. So we had coffee. And he said, I'm building this bar and it's going to be a speakeasy. I thought it would be neat to just do like some little like short film, like just sort of a making of the bar, maybe like a time lapse kind of a thing like that. But the thing is like I have all these tiki mugs in my house, and it's going to be like dedicated, this bar, to the tiki mugs. What do you mean you have like a whole bunch of tiki mugs in your house? And he's like, well, I've got like almost 1,000. I think at that time it was like almost 1,000 tiki mugs.
At that point, Justin, time out. Yeah. Wait a minute.
But the thing that's great about Fini is like, he's like an encyclopedia of tiki history. So during that process of that coffee when we were having, I'm writing down all these notes that he's telling me, all these people, like just you name it, he was talking about him. And I said, I'd love to come over your house and just see this collection. I went over, brought my camera as I always do, and filmed him, just interviewed him, walking around his house. Mike, his house was full of tiki mugs. I'm not exaggerating. They were everywhere. I think,
right? Yeah, it's a problem. Closets, storage, many of them that hadn't been opened for years and years. And
So that was something that drew, and I said to him, I said, okay, the bar thing, I'm into this, but this mug thing,
here's the angle.
This is interesting. Yeah. This is interesting to me. And so he didn't even want to be in a documentary. This didn't start as him like being in a doc. I had to like say to him, no, this is good. Like, I think you're good. And he was good on camera.
I thought this should be sort of a love letter to these artists, because I was a fan. I couldn't see the forest for the trees, right? And certainly as a fan, I'm like, well, I don't belong in this thing, and it was sort of Josh and Mike Clemens, who was right there from the inception, who's another an old college buddy who was been a producer, and he's like, I think that there's a way to use you where you can sort of humanize this, we need an everyman, we need the guy so people can identify with something, because clearly most people that are into tiki are already into that, know about it, they've already been hooked. This was a way to maybe reach beyond the goal was to reach beyond to the general interest viewer, because it's such a colorful, really interesting niche that's sort of right under the pop cultural underbelly in America. If you're not into it, you might not know that your neighbor's into it.
you've been exposed to it. I mean, if you've lived a little while, been out of your house a few times, you have seen some version of tiki. I'll call it Polynesian, South Pacific Islanders culture, right? Is that, I mean, is that kind of
Yeah,
the roots of
yeah,
it?
yeah. We call it Polynesian pop.
Polynesian pop. You've seen, yeah, most people have seen that. Vinny, what adjectives would you add to that description in terms of tiki?
Well, I think the history of it, is it goes back a little further than person who's sort of just the casual observer might see. Well, it was a fad during the 60s and the 70s. By the early 80s and certainly by the 90s, most of the great old Polynesian palaces had started to disappear. Tiki was a product of what was going on in America at the time. So it's why it's so closely allied to mid-century modernism and all this. But you had this post-war era where there was a lot of people coming back from the war in the Pacific, but there was also this newfound optimism. Hey, we're all not going to be killed by this guy who's trying to take over the world, and there's a loosening of social mores. There's a much greater westward movement in the United States in the post-war, and there was this fascination. And then when Kon-Tiki, the bestseller, and the movie came out, and it was even taught in a more abbreviated version, was taught to kids in elementary school to show how science can be exciting. And so
Yeah.
they would show kids like you can go out and prove your own hypothesis, like this Thor Heyerdahl. And so the nation was really captured by all that. And then Hawaii becomes a state when it's not easy to just go there. So the whole country is sort of swept with this Hawaiiana thing, but no real, you couldn't just jump on a plane. It was very difficult. There wasn't, I think it really, Tiki at its heart was built around escapism and fantasy and America's ideal of what was going on, and Polynesia was sort of the setting for it.
Yeah. And Justin, I just want to weigh in and just want to hear your sort of perspective in terms of what you knew and what you learned in this process of making this film. But for me, I remember as a young schoolboy, remember a lot of what you just mentioned, Finney, but also the Easter Islands and the statues that were for a long time. How did they get there? There was this mystique around that, which was like, wow, that's super cool. Who made them? Were these made by aliens who just dropped, I mean, there was a lot of kind of folklore around them. And it was endlessly intriguing. And let's not forget women in grass skirts. That didn't hurt at all either.
And no tops,
No
right?
tops and grass skirts. Okay. All right, I'm there. So and so yeah, there was a lot of fun, but there was a mystique around it as well to me.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think my first ever experience with it might even be yours too, was the Tiki Bird review, going to Disney
Oh,
World
and you
as a
chanted
kid.
Oh
Tiki,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
That
right.
was the first time I ever saw anything in person like Tiki. Of course, there was Gilligan's Island and there was Swiss Family
Yeah,
Robinson and stuff
everybody
like
knew about the
that.
Tiki episode on the Brady Bunch.
Of
That was
course, the
like,
Brady Bunch
that's a
episode.
lot of people's primer to
Yeah.
this was in these, little American pop cultural snippets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they call it kitschy kind of
It
snippets of
is.
yeah.
It's true.
But I do think, and I don't want to. It's not a serious film. It's not a serious film, but
No.
there is something about the culture of the South Pacific that created this ecosystem, and that one thing you mentioned about traveling from one island to the other. I've learned in the subsequent years since I first was exposed to it, the amazing feat of going from island to island by these different peoples who were moving around the South Pacific, remarkable lengths in terms of traveling across the ocean and the navigation required. There is a lot there about the culture.
Josh was very good in his filmmaking and his storytelling to take Tiki seriously without sort of taking ourselves too seriously.
Yes.
Yeah.
I,
Because, I think a lot of it is, you have people that are very passionate about this and it can almost get to a point where there's disagreement about this or that when, if you start to step back and when in doubt, zoom out just a little bit, it really is about escapism.
yeah.
But I think the movie really shows how it's about community. People that might have come together because of an appreciation for a form or what is now really an art movement from an aesthetic thing. But underlying, it's really about the people that are involved and the communities that they've created around this shared love.
Absolutely.
That's the movie. It
That
really.
is the movie. You're absolutely right.
I had said, in another interview, that I like making things that make people feel good.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's the movies that I like to make.
Yeah.
And so as I started going down this rabbit hole, and meeting all these different people, you get nothing but joy. At the end of the day, when you go to Tiki Oasis, or if you go to Cabali, or if you go to another tiki bar, if you go to the Mai Kai in Florida, you are transported, and everyone in that place is having a good time. We're in a wild time right now where there's a lot of device action, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are sort of glued to that. And what's wonderful, and I've been to Cabali now numerous times, he's always got people there. There's no sign on the door. The only way people know about that bar is by people telling other people. That's communication. That's human nature. And when you're in that space and you're having cocktails and you're drinking those drinks and you're listening to that music and you're looking at one another's what you're wearing, you're interacting, and that is impossible to achieve on a device. I promise you that.
It's very much an analog experience, which is, I think the pendulum might be swinging back on that a little bit.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. But by the way, so let's let people know where Cabali is. I think you mentioned earlier, but let's go over it again.
Yeah, it's in Oro Valley, which is the northwest corner of Tucson, and it is a speakeasy. And of course, speakeasy is the secret you tell the whole world about. But it is a little tricky to find. But the kind of the interesting thing, I find that most people over 40 have trouble finding it. And most people under 40 immediately log on to TikTok and Instagram where they can find 10 tutorials about how to find the door.
Right.
And it's almost like the way we've, what have you been trained in doing? Right. So, but I am sort of very happy and quite surprised at how many younger people, and I'm talking about in their 20s and 30s, that are coming at Tiki from interest in a mixology. Obviously, the speakeasy thing is very hot and that doesn't hurt. But what I'm seeing is a lot of them are coming from a generation where they were gamers or they have a working knowledge of anime. And Tiki is very, it's right in that vein. So they might not know the historical aspects of Trader Vic or Don the Beachcomber or this artist or that artist, but they think it's dope. Actually, that's enough. If it brings them in and it exposes, because I think anything that's not growing is dying.
Yeah.
So this is really fun for me to be able to sort of pass this to the next group. We always think that there's a crowd out there and this is who you're marketing to, but it's actually not this defined thing. It's more like a parade, right? There's people coming into it. There's people leaving. There's people being born and people dying, and it's constantly moving. And I think stuff like this that people care about that really needs to be preserved and passed on, that this is a great way to do it.
Yeah, and Josh, you did a great job of capturing all of the different, I hate to say segments because that sounds like it's divided up, but the different parts of Tiki, the artists, the history, the collectors, the characters, the legends of this particular art form. It's pretty cool.
Thanks. It was a challenge. I tried something with this movie that I hadn't done before. My background comes from movie trailers and fast cutting. So I wanted to combine a little bit of that style to this. And I also wanted to tell two stories. I wanted to tell the one story about Fini building this bar, and then I wanted to tell the story about the history of this movement. And you got to find ways to get back and forth between those two things. So it was, technically it was a challenge, but it was a good challenge. And I mean, that's one of the comments that we do get, that they felt that those were people have felt that they're pretty seamless, which that you feel that way too.
Yeah, I do. There's so many interesting characters. And you're right about the kind of sense of community. I do real quickly want to remind listeners that the film is called Cabali and the Tiki Mug Obsession, and it is screening at the Dances with Films Festival. And it's going to be screening is June 20th at 8 o'clock, and that's at what used to be Chinese Ramen, now TCL, Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. You can't miss it. If you've been in Hollywood, it's an iconic corner of Hollywood Boulevard. You just can't miss that. It's the place where people used to put their hands into the wet cement in order to signify their immortality, I guess. So please, if you're listening to our conversation, check it out on June 20th. And as I said to you before we got started, this is a film I really do think it's going to catch on. Within the first couple of minutes, you're in. You're just kind of pulled into this story. So, yeah. That's funny the way we're introduced to you, Fini, because it's almost like there's a flashing red light over your head warning
All right.
Robinson, warning, Will Robinson, I am going to implode at some point, or I've, all the different tasks you've taken on. And the thing with the numbers of days, and that's kind of
Right.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah, I think that was a good device because you have to realize how much time was
yeah,
expired going by. It was a lot for somebody to try to distill down, certainly into 90 minutes, because you could do a whole mini series about Tiki. And I think using the mugs as sort of the device, anytime the storyline sort of strayed too far from the mugs, then we knew we were getting out of our more difficult about knowing what to leave out, because there's so much. But I think Josh is just a great storyteller, and he just did a great. And I think you're right, because of the editing and the way, and he came at this from an editing standpoint, and the way he was able to toggle between two storylines so seamlessly that it doesn't feel herky jerky. And I do think the quick paced action sort of keeps people engaged that might not necessarily be into Tiki. So you don't want to get too esoteric about this, this artist or that artist. You had to sort of tell the whole story.
And all the people who speak to the camera that are involved, whether they're collectors or they're artists, you can feel the vibe, the energy coming from them about how passionate they are and why. And at the end of the day, there's some recognition that this is the fun part of life. This is the things that we get to enjoy. Right. And by the way, I'm very happy for you. That sounds like Cabali's doing well. I know this had to be a high wire act for many years, it looks like for you. And yeah, so glad. And your investor, whose name I've forgotten here, who was a little bit concerned.
Well,
I think concerned.
There's definitely, that's part of the drama component of it, is if I was, a rich kid that was just going out and buying a bunch of stuff, it might not have had the dramatic appeal of somebody who's sort of pushing all the chips into the center of the table and like, well, we're just going to see where this is going to go, and that life is not a dress rehearsal. And this was just sort of a manifestation of that.
And I want to add one thing. What's interesting about Fini to me personally is, and what kept pushing me story-wise, was here's a guy that was trying to find his place, right? His siblings are very successful, right? His father unfortunately passed. He had a very good relationship with his father. And he was sure about what he wanted to do, but he wasn't sure necessarily about how to get to that end point. And what we see in this movie, which I think so many people can relate to, is when you have a dream and when you want to do something, we can all relate to that. But you get a chance to see a guy do that. And without any spoilers, his daughter is in this film too. And her remarks in the film are so important, and they're so emotional. And it drives home the human story that we're telling,
Right.
That's true.
I don't think it's viewed as a movie about Tiki people as much as it's viewed as a movie about people.
Yeah, and to your point, anytime you can reinforce the notion that following your passion is the best way to get through life, if life has afforded you that opportunity to be able to pursue your passion, and you do, and you see it pay off, or whoever that might be, a payoff for them, that's a great story. That's a great.
And by the way, he's doing it not to make a fortune. He's doing it to put up his collection so that people can enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's admirable.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's kindness. That's good, man. I like that. I like that story. I like that character. He's an easy guy to hang with and to share the story with.
Yeah, that's great. Well, congratulations to both of you. And I'm sure you're going to have a great time on June 20th at 8 o'clock, starting at 8 o'clock at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood as part of the Dances with Films Film Festival. And just congratulations all the way around. Thank you to our guest today, the director of Cabali and the Tiki Mug, that's Joshua Dragotta, as well as the subject of the film, Doug Fini, Finical. To both of you, thank you so very much for spending some time with us.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for your.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.